first thing I wanted to do, because this is very important to us that work at the Registrar of Voters, that we think about why we're doing what we do and what we're trying to accomplish. And so I just wanted to read you real quick our mission statement, which is to provide election services for the citizens of Orange County, to ensure equal access to the election process, protect the integrity of the votes, and maintain a transparent, accurate, and fair process. And I just recently, since I became the Registrar of Voters in March of 2022, I met with my team and we did a couple days of kind of strategic planning and had them come up with a vision statement. So the vision statement is to ensure excellence in the administration of elections, to inspire confidence and trust in the democratic process. Now these are a lot of kind of big words, government type words. So the next step I talk about is kind of what do we do to try to accomplish these things, our mission and our vision. So we really focus on customer service, putting the voter first, how we serve the voter. We also have a strong commitment to quality management and our quality management system. We have numerous and varied security measures that we apply for every election. Community relations are very important. I've got a very robust outreach team that's going to community events all year round, as well as doing presentations, educational work. And then really both within our office and with the community is communication, teamwork, and collaboration. So as I understood, you wanted to kind of focus on the security issues tonight. And so I have kind of identified some, I said there were numerous and varied measures that we put into place. And we categorize those as 4 different approaches to protection that we do for security and integrity. I'm doing this very well. No, that's okay. I'm okay. Yeah, I can work with it because once I get through the first couple slides, I know he said we'd do Q&A at the end, but I'm more than happy just to have a conversation. I don't have to go through slides. But I did want to kind of give you an overview of the security measures that we put into place. So there's different protections we do. There's physical protections, technical protections, process protections, and what I call people protections. Now, physical includes applying and checking security seals on all of our election equipment during an election, as well as on our ballot drop boxes. And regarding the ballot drop boxes, because I know there are concerns among some in the community regarding those are very secure drop boxes. They're made of thick steel. They're bolted to the concrete. They're individually keyed. And when we work with the ballots, we're picking them up almost every day during the voting period. The first 2 Sundays I get my staff off so they're not working 30 days in a row. But we do pick up almost every single day. Technical measures include not connecting our ballot scanners and our vote tally system to the internet. And also, and this is a call I've heard from some in the community that they want us to go back to voting on paper. We do vote on paper. Every voter votes a paper ballot. We are scanning a paper ballot to tally the votes. We're not doing, I mean, we may have a piece of equipment that helps voters who need assistance to vote, to help them, mark their ballot. But that prints a full ballot, which still has to be scanned. So every single voter has a paper ballot. Even if somebody is voting at home, getting an accessible vote-by-mail ballot on their computer, they have to print that out once they mark it, mail it into us or drop it off, and then we are then scanning the votes on that ballot. So every single voter votes a paper ballot. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. So you use the accessible vote by mail?
No, I went in and voted. But okay. I noticed you can check to make sure what it's, as you're doing it, you kind of check your answers before, but then you're done. It's just like your vote's recorded, and I'm like, wait, does it say what I vote?
Are you saying the scanner? When you've marked your paper ballot and you're feeding it into the scanner to count your ballots?
Yeah, it kind of shows you, right?
Yeah.
But then it just says your vote is recorded, and that's it. And you can go online and make sure that it gets there. It says it's recorded, but it doesn't say anything else. And I'm like, to me, I just felt like it wasn't really. I don't know, I just felt like, well, what if I didn't do it right, or there was an issue? How would I even know? Because I kind of glanced at it, and yeah, you're kind of skimming, okay, I think I got it right, I may have voted for that and voted for that. But what if I missed it by one, or something happened? Is there any sort of, anything? Well, no, you do review, but any sort of receipt, I guess.
No.
And could there be, or why can't there be, is I guess my question.
So I don't know if I can answer the why, but the equipment that the state has certified for scanning ballots does not produce receipts. So if you think back to the equipment we had prior to 2020, where everybody was voting on a touchscreen, that would print kind of a tape that showed how you voted, but it wasn't something you could take home with you, because that was our audit trail, was that tape that was getting printed. Now, as I said, it prints a full ballot. That has to be then taken over to the scanner if you're using that piece of equipment, or when you show up and you check in, we can print you a ballot for your precinct so you get the right contests on it. And then once you scan it, it's cast. There's no pulling it out of that box. So just the way that there's 4 systems that are certified in the state for counting ballots, scanning ballots. The one we use, which is Hart InterCivic, Dominion Voting Systems, ES&S, and then the County of LA built their own. They spent several $100 million building their own system. So if you heard back in 2020 about Smartmatic, LA County is the only jurisdiction in the entire country that uses Smartmatic software on the system that they built. So you've got all those systems that none of them print you a receipt that you leave with. But what I can tell you to ensure that the equipment is properly tallying the votes on your ballot, we are required, and it's something I had on a later slide, but I'll just deal with it now. We are required to do an audit every canvass, the 30 days after, 28 to 30 days after an election. We have to randomly select at least 1% of all the precincts in the county. And then we typically have to select more than that, because you first randomly select 1%, then you have to make sure every single contest that's on every ballot is concluded in the audit. And so if that 1% precincts doesn't produce every single contest, we have to keep picking additional precincts until we get every single contest. Then we hand count every single ballot in those precincts and compare the hand count to the machine count. And what I can tell you is that every single audit we've done, the only difference between the hand count and the machine count is a result of human determination or human error in marking the ballot. It's never a problem with the scanner not counting the votes correct. It's always because, say, somebody has marked their ballot at home, vote by mail, didn't follow the instructions to completely fill in the square. Say they circled it, say they put a check through it, say they used light pencil rather than the black ink pen that we asked them to use. They could be a number of things that they do that doesn't follow the instructions. And it's possible, like if somebody used a light pencil, that the scanner wouldn't even see it. Or if they used a red pen, the scanner's not going to see red pen. So that's not an error of the equipment, that's just how it's programmed and how we instruct people. But the law says if a voter doesn't follow the instructions for marking a ballot, we still have to count their votes. So, we, as part of our process of processing vote by mail ballots, we've got a team of people sitting at tables who are looking at every single vote by mail ballot that came out of an envelope and looking for damage, looking for mismarks, anything that might cause us to have to send those ballots to what we call our duplication team. They then go and they duplicate all the person's votes onto an official ballot that we can then scan that properly fills in the squares. So the only discrepancies we see is when the machine couldn't see something or the voter marked it in a way, say they voted for one person then just changed their mind and X'd it out and then voted for somebody. The scanner's still going to see marks within each square, and it's going to say it's an overvote. And so, unless we catch that in the process before it goes to the scan room, that's going to be something that's going to be a little bit different. I saw a hand over here before I go over there.
I was going to suggest maybe go through what you want to go through first and then go to Q&A, or else we'll end up with a broken...
You guys mind if I go through a couple more security measures and then we can kind of have a discussion? Yeah.
Write that down. Take your phone and write it in your phone.
Okay, so the other thing in terms of the technical measures that we use is that we prevent double voting by using electronic voting rosters on what are called poll books. And so those actually, and there are some voters who I've had to try to explain this to, and they don't always get it, but people know that the voting system, the scanners, the equipment that marks the ballot for people who need assistance, the printers that print a ballot for somebody when they show up to a vote center, all of that equipment and the tally servers that we use back at our office, none of that's connected to the internet, as I said. But obviously an electronic roster has to be connected to the internet. And it's not connected to the voting system that counts votes, but it is connected to our voter registration system so that when somebody returns a mail ballot, and we start it through the process, it's scanning the voter's ID barcode on the return envelope and then giving them credit for voting in the election. So if that voter then shows up at a vote center, they're going to look them up on the roster and see that person already voted. Similarly, if somebody goes to a vote center, votes, and then later tries to mail in their mail ballot, we're going to then not count the mail ballot because we'll see that they already voted in person. So there's very limited information that transmits from the poll books to the voter registration system, but it's enough so that we can give that credit. It's securely and encrypted as it's sent to a secure server in the cloud and then bounces back down to our election management system, which has our voter registration database on it. And because it's doing that, every single vote center the information's being updated in near real time, so that if somebody went to one vote center and tried to go down the street to the next vote center, it would already have updated the roster to know that they already voted. So that is one part of our equation that is connected to the internet, but that's important for protecting against double voting. Next, I mentioned the different protections we do. We've got process measures. So this includes a very robust voter file maintenance program that I'll just say to start, but I imagine this will kind of come up again in the questions. But if we get any information from a voter directly or from an official government source, like say the state correction system that somebody has put into state prison for a felony, if we get information or from the post office, like if we mail a ballot to somebody and it comes back to us undeliverable, but there's a forwarding address on it, then we can make changes to their registration based on that official source. And we have to, by law, in state law, have to update that voter registration record within 5 business days. We're constantly doing that work so that we are averaging, I want to say, close to 60,000 voter registration updates a month. Yes. We're constantly working those files. So it's not like, when are you going to purge? It's like, we're doing it every day. So, yeah. And it may not be 500,000 voters, it's just 500,000 changes. Yeah, you could have a voter who does multiple times, you could have a voter who makes multiple changes. So it's actually having to touch a record and update it, about 60,000 a month. It came down a little bit in 23. It was more closer to like 58,000. But I'm expecting in 2024, because we've got 2 presidential elections, it's going to go up. And so we're constantly working those. If we get information from a third source, say we mail a ballot, somebody gets it and calls us and says, hey, this person you mailed it to doesn't live here anymore. We can't change the record based on that, but obviously it gives us a lead so that we can then send a forwardable postcard to the voter to get forwarded to them, hopefully. And if they don't respond to that to confirm where they are, then we put them on track to be canceled eventually. It's not something that can be canceled right away. If we give them that warning that because we've got information that indicates they've moved out of the state or some other reason that they could be canceled, we let them know that if you don't get back to us and don't vote in any election between now and 2 more November even number year elections, you will be canceled. And so it's a process. They'll be on the inactive roll, so we're not going to keep mailing them ballots. But until we hear back, if they don't vote or we don't hear back to them, it takes a couple of years before we can actually remove them from the voter rolls. So we've got active registration, which is the 1.8. We've got inactives where people have either moved or something and haven't told us where they are, and we're in the process of waiting them. We've got people we cancel. So, I'll make a note of that. It's based on federal law and then state law that implements the federal law. But so we're doing that all the time and maintaining those. The process, as I also mentioned, the audits that we do during the canvass, that's another process that we do to make sure that the election is correct, accurate, and secure. The other thing that we do as part of the voter maintenance, I'll just say real quickly, is that every vote by mail ballot that comes in, the voter's supposed to sign the return envelope. And then we have staff who are looking at every single signature on every envelope and comparing it to the signatures we have in the voter registration file to see if they compare. We start by assuming that it is the voter's signature, and it takes 3 members of my team to agree that there's significant enough differences to actually challenge it. So the state errs on the side of the voter, puts in place that I've got to have a very strict way of a number of people that have to look at it before I can say that's not the voter's signature. And then if we come to that conclusion, then I've got to mail them a notice, first class mail, saying, hey, we got a ballot from you, the signatures don't compare. If you did in fact vote it, here's a form you can fill out and sign, and then if they return that, we will compare the signature on the form to the signature that we have on file and go through the same process. We don't send a second notice after that if the notice doesn't compare. But that, we have those processes in place to do that, to make sure that the registration's up to date. We also, even if we accept the ballot as being close enough, but we notice there's differences, perhaps because of age or some medical condition that's causing the hand to shake, something that we notice that might be different about their signature. After every statewide election, we are mailing a letter to those folks that we've flagged, as well as with a paper registration affidavit, and saying, hey, we know people's signatures changed over time. We want to make sure we have your current signature so that when you vote, we can compare it properly. And we ask them to re-register on the paper so that we can update that. Now, the last thing, I believe I'm in the last one, which is people. Now, people measures include every person that we hire to work in our office during election, whether it's in our office, in the field, or in a vote center. We're hiring them as county employees. So they're going through a full criminal background check before we actually put them to work. We have an extensive training program that includes about a day of online training, as well as about a day of in-person training. We start with people who've worked elections before so that we try to get as many returners as possible. We'll typically get at least about half of our vote center workers are people who worked in an election before. We've got to recruit additional people. We also work really closely with the district attorney and the sheriff to help us with that people power. So an example of how we use the sheriff is that there is a sheriff's deputy stationed at every collection center that we have for ballots before they come back. So, we had 183 vote centers in this last election in March. We then assigned those vote centers to a kind of a regional collection center where they deliver their ballots each night that their vote center's open. And then those ballots, once they're all collected from all the vote centers assigned to that collection center, will come back to our office for processing. On the last night, so every night the paper ballots are coming back because we need the paper ballots for the audits that we do. We need to make sure we have those every night. The actual scanners have a thumb drive in them, which is part of the secure certified system. If somebody took it and tried to read it, they wouldn't be able to because you had to have the software to be able to read it. And if somebody took it, we also have the paper backup, right? So we could rescan the paper backup if for some reason the thumb drive went missing. But essentially, on that last night on election day, after the vote centers close, the vote centers are bringing those thumb drives to the collection center, and then when those thumb drives are driven back to our office, they're being escorted by a sheriff's deputy to make sure they get back to our office. The DA has investigators who are working every day. We have vote centers open so that if there's an issue that needs to be investigated, potential intimidation, voter fraud, anything like that, we can call them and they can go out and try to investigate it. So those are kind of some of the measures that we do. As I said, I've got other notes, but I'd much rather have kind of a Q&A conversation with you guys. So I know you had your hand up.
So I'm a big proponent of tech person.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you got that covered. Sounds like you have all that covered. But kind of based on what she was saying, and I totally believe that it's your responsibility to scan the thing,
Yep.
make sure you filled it out correctly, and before you put it in there.
Right.
I mean, the receipt thing, that would be nice, but it is what it is, right? But it sounded like the breakdown possibly could be if you did it too light, you did other things like that. Are there people on the ground there that are making sure that you're 100% aware exactly how you're supposed to fill it out? Because it sounds like those are where those are where things could fall through the cracks. You got all the other stuff covered.
Yeah, so if you're voting in person at a vote center and you mismark it or do too light of a writing instrument, the scanner's going to reject it on the spot.
Because before you used to be able to do it with the computer, and you're not going to make a mistake. It's your responsibility to look it over.
And that's
now you're back to paper, so
yeah, and it's still
point.
People still have the option. Well, I say that the accessible ballot marking devices are to make sure for people who need assistance marking their ballot can use it. But any voter, if they want to mark their ballot that way, using the touchscreen, having it print the mark so that they know it'll get scanned, that's an option for you. That's an option for you. It's available to everybody. We have to have at least 3 in every vote center for people who need assistance marking a ballot. Yeah, and so, but what I'll say is, if you're voting in person, then if it's too light, if you've made check marks or circled the squares rather than filling them in, the ballot's not going to go through the scanner. It's going to push it back out and say there's an error. It'll kick it back out, and then the person who's assigned to kind of monitor the station without looking at how people mark their ballot, they kind of need to be in the area to kind of help people. They'll then say, hey, there seems to be an issue here that is rejecting your ballot. Why don't you go back to the check-in station? They can print you a new ballot. You can remark it again. So, and then they will hand us that one, and we'll write spoiled on it, so it can't get double voted. Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I want to say that I really enjoy getting the confirmation that my ballot was received, and then I get the confirmation that it's been counted. That's fantastic. Yeah. I know with the U.S. Post Office, I can see what my mail is the next day. They scan every piece of mail that comes in. You get Is that available for me to look at my ballot?
Yes.
It is? Okay, great.
So as part of the tracking, you can go in and look yourself to see that the post office has received it and they're processing it. And then once it arrives at our office, when we pick up the mail each day from the Postal Service, as soon as we get the ballots into starting the process, which the first step when we bring them back, we keep them sorted. So the ones coming by mail are all in one pile. Then every ballot that's in a drop box gets stayed together with that drop box. We can keep track of where people cast their ballot. Same with they just drop their vote by mail ballot off at a vote center. We keep those separate. So once they're sorted, then we start feeding them through a mail sorting machine, which scans the barcode, the voter ID barcode on the outside of the envelope, and it also takes a picture of the signature, so that the people who are doing signature comparison don't have to have the actual envelope in their hands when they're doing it. They're pulling up four ballots at a time on a computer screen.
I did signature verification.
Yeah, doing signature
verification. So I can see my actual who I voted for in each check box. I mean, I can see my actual ballot.
Well, voting is secret under California Constitution.
Right.
So we go through the whole signature verification process. The ballot stays in the envelope. We don't open it until we've accepted the vote by mail ballot as being actually from the voter, that the signatures compared. And then once the ballot's separated from the envelope, we no longer know whose ballot that is.
Okay, but what about the ones that are in place? Last question. The ones that we actually do in the voting center, there's an image of that. There's no way for us to see that image.
Correct. Yeah, under state law, the ballot images are confidential. They're not stuff that we make public.
I'm going to swap them. Why is the mail-in ballot different than the in-person ballot?
The process, you mean? Or
The ballot itself.
the ballot itself are the same.
Then why can't you just bring your
You can.
ballot in?
You can. You can bring if you wanted to vote as in person, but use the vote by mail ballot we mailed to you that you pre-marked at home, you can bring it into a vote center and scan it.
Yeah, well, you can't scan it.
Yes, you can.
It
Just changed this year.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a new law.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I ran for Central Committee. I went, and I won, but I went to your office. Your staff is fantastic.
Thank you.
They were wonderful, on top of everything. So my one question is, when you talk about, when you send out ballots and they go to like a wrong address, or maybe someone was sent to an address that had moved, I'm kind of concerned about people grabbing those ballots, not returning them, not calling you, and forging a signature. But how do you deal with that? I would assume you would pick up on that, but I'm kind of concerned about that.
Yeah, because we're doing signature comparison, I believe that we would, if somebody's trying to forge some signature of somebody they don't even know, we're going to notice significant differences in those signatures. And we're not going to open that envelope and take the ballot out. It's going to stay challenged. We would then end up sending a notification letter to the voter whose ballot it was saying, hey, we received a ballot, the signatures don't match. If the voter then called us and said, I never voted, we're going to refer that to the district attorney to try to figure out. They may or may not be able to, but we're always going to refer those kind of things to the DA. So in the 2022 general election, what I can tell you is the 2022 general election, the percentage of ballots that we mailed out that the post office sent back to us as undeliverable was 2.67%. Very small, which is better than industry average for mass mailings. Then for this primary election, it actually came down to under 2%. It's like about 1.6%. It's not because we feel like we're doing such a aggressive job on maintaining the voter rolls that the accuracy is close as it can be. I mean, obviously, as I said, we're doing 60,000 updates a month, so people move a lot. So, or change something. So we believe that we're doing a really good job, and we believe that that undeliverable return rate that we have is demonstrating that we've got a pretty good. That's how we feel about it. Yes, sir.
So, sir, with the state law that allows every household, every voter to get a ballot
Yes, sir.
mailed to them,
Yes.
I'm concerned with vote harvesting.
Okay.
And the instance that I want to mention is that it was reported that there were 5,000 votes that were cast by UCI students during COVID when they all went home.
Okay.
Did your department ever do any investigation, or was there ever any formal complaint filed that would have instigated an investigation by you or the DA?
If I had been the registrar in 2020 and I had gotten that report, we would have investigated it. That's not something I had heard about before in the 2 years I've been here.
Well, they all went home, and there somehow were 7,500 votes cast in the precincts that covered UCI.
Yeah.
Another question I have, how do you verify citizenship?
We don't. The state law says that when somebody registers and checks the mark that they're a citizen and signs under penalty of perjury that they're eligible to vote, that is proof to us that they're a citizen. So we do not check that. But if we got information from somebody who said, I know this voter on your roll is not a citizen, we would then give that to the district attorney or the SOS to investigate.
Is there any practical method to check it?
I have no authority to check it.
More than we do now, or by getting reports, individual reports?
I have no authority. As I said, the state law says that I have to accept if somebody fills out an affidavit and checks the box that they're a citizen, that I accept that as proof, that they've signed under penalty of perjury, that they are a citizen.
And one final question regarding what Huntington Beach did as far as saying now we're going to have ID. Has that is that constitutionally going to fly?
I'm not going to comment on that because there's litigation,
Oh,
and I don't want to be a party to that litigation. I don't want to cause the county to become a party to that litigation if I can avoid it. So the Secretary of State and the AG sued Huntington Beach after the election, specifically on that purpose, saying that that's not allowed in state law.
Except they're a charter city again.
They are. So I can't tell you. I don't know how that's going to resolve, but that's. As I said, I want. what I'll share with you is going into the election, I saw it as my role to be an impartial election administrator and did not want to say anything about the charter amendment to influence how somebody might vote on it, so I didn't say anything. Now that there's litigation, I have another reason not to say anything. Eventually, if that is resolved, then, and depending on how it's resolved, then I would expect I'd need to have a conversation with the city about what they want to do and figure out whether I could continue to serve them or if they'd have to do their election themselves. So the city clerk is an elections official for the city, not me. The city basically asked me to provide services to them. So that is an option that they could run their own election. Yes, ma'am.
If I work in the city of Irvine
Yes.
and I live in LA, can I vote at one of our voting centers in Irvine?
If you have your LA County ballot and you've marked it and you want to return it while you're working in Irvine, we will forward it. We will accept it and forward it to LA County. If you're asking if you can get an Orange County ballot to vote, no.
No, what I'm asking, I come in, I live in LA.
Yeah.
And I let them know when I walk in. And they say, well, you get conventional or some other,
Well,
but it won't have all of your
contests on it.
Right.
Yeah, if somebody from a different county came into one of our vote centers and wanted to actually get a ballot and vote,
Yes.
they would be provisional because they're saying they don't live in our county. Bottom line, that's not going to count because when we get a provision, when we research a provisional, we're going to look at it and say, well, this person's out of county. They voted in the wrong county. But if you brought your vote by mail ballot in from LA County and dropped it off in one of our drop boxes or at one of our vote centers, I'm required by law to forward that to LA within 7 days. So you wouldn't, if you're not eligible to vote in Orange County, then your ballot's going to be rejected. Your provisional ballot would be rejected. Yes, sir.
Before I ask you some detailed questions,
Sure.
if you were a candidate, would you be happy with what you know about the system process? I'm sure your answer will be yes, but would you be really happy, comfortable?
I am very comfortable with Orange County's election administration, the security of it, the integrity of it. Our staff cares very deeply about this process and making sure that it's accurate, that it's secure, and we do everything we can within the law to make that happen. Granted, there's policy issues that there would be a debate about whether it's voter ID or something else, but I can tell you under the way that we're required to conduct the election, we're looking for every opportunity to improve the security and the integrity of the election.
Okay, my detailed question is that about the maintaining
Yeah. Okay.
people who move. How quickly, what kind of a system do you have to update them?
We're getting regularly, like weekly reports from the state, monthly reports or weekly reports from the County Department of Health Services, letting us know, HCA, Health Community, I can't remember what HCA stands for, but anyway, yeah. They're an official, as I said, if we get information that somebody's died from an official source, from the state, from the county, then we can cancel that voter. We now, under the law, have to, before we officially cancel them, we have to send them a notice saying, hey, we're about to cancel you because we got information you died. And then we cross our fingers somebody doesn't send back, I'm not dead. But that's now the requirement. As I said, there's very specific processes about canceling people. So I have to send a notice to that person saying, hey, we've received information, you're deceased. If this is an error, please let us know within 14 days or else your registration will be canceled.
Oh, this is one final question is regarding the people who are moving out. How you are maintaining that, and suppose that I know a case, if I have two homes in another state and then also here, and I register another city as well, and here, and then everybody gets a mail ballot. If I voted in two different states, do you have a national registry of voters?
No, There is something called ERIC, which a lot of states are a member of to share that information. California is not a member of ERIC. And there are some conservative states who have concerns about ERIC that have recently, in the last couple of years, pulled out of it. So there is we have a way within the state, if somebody tries to vote in 2 counties, we will know that in the voter registration system. But if somebody votes in California in another state, I don't have access to the other state's information.
One is dishonest, they can vote in 2 different states.
Yeah, and if they get caught, it's a crime.
So I have a question about those mail-in ballots because so we used to have adult kids that used our address as their mailing address, and they all moved out of state during COVID, and we ended up with 6 different mail-in ballots coming to our house of 2. Mm-hmm. I shredded the other ones because I'm not going to forward them to another state.
Right.
But what if I have integrity. I'm not going to vote, not me, but I know there are a lot of people out there who probably don't have so much integrity, and I get the idea of the matching with the mail, but if then you just send something saying, can you verify, we're not sure you match, and then that same unscrupulous person just says, oh, that's me, with the same signature, it seems to me like you could get around that pretty easily if you're bent on voting 6 times. I'm just kind of wondering if you can address that and how. I get the taking them off, but it sounds like you're waiting 2 years, so they're still, it's been 2 Novembers now, 4 years later.
Well, I don't have to wait 2 years if, say in this instance, your children ask me to cancel their registration. Right. So, right. But what you could have done, if I want to remain optimistic, okay, and positive, if you'd asked me the election you got ballots for all your kids and they're not there, they live out of state, and you called me and say, what do I do? I would have instructed you, because if I get information from an official source, I can make a change to the registration. So I would have said, right, not at this address, and give it back to the post office so that it comes back to me from an official source, and then I can inactivate them and make sure that they aren't on the active voter roll at that point. So going back to your point, though, if somebody was to get the signature verification statement in the mail and then send it back, as I said, we're going to check the signature. So if they're forging the signature the same way on the statement, then we're going to compare the signature on the statement, and most likely, I would hope, we would reject it again. But you're right. There is a certain element of trusting that the voters are following the law and doing the right thing. And as I said, if we ever get information, if somebody was unscrupulous and did that, and I got information that happened, that's something I'm referring for investigation. I keep saying I refer because I don't have enforcement authority. I'm not a regulatory agency. I'm an administrator. So I administer the election under the law, and if I get evidence that somebody's broken the law, I'm going to forward that to the district attorney or the secretary of state. So 2020, since 2020, we are mailing a ballot to every single active registered voter. The percentage of people that are casting vote by mail ballots versus in-person ballots in this last election in March, the percentage of vote by mail ballots of all the ballots cast, the percentage that were vote by mail was 84.5%, and in person was 15.5%. So if you go back to 2020, that it's all stayed kind of in a spread of about 5 or 6 percentage points. 2020 presidential general election during COVID, a whole lot more vote by mail came in. A lot of them were early. People reacted much differently because they weren't sure how the post office was going to work, if it was going to work properly. They wanted to get their ballots in early. They probably had their mind made up who they were going to vote for early. So in that election, we got a larger percentage of ballots back early. We've kind of gone back to where, you've got a 4-week period from when we mail the ballot to when election day is. So the number of ballots, vote by mail ballots returned to us before election day was about 500,000, And then when I go back to 2022, because I those numbers memorized, the ones from March I don't have memorized yet. 2022 general election, I think it was 540, somewhere between like 5 and 520,000 vote by mail ballots were returned early. Then 311,000 vote by mail ballots were cast on election day, either put in the mail to get a postmark on election day, dropped into one of our drop boxes, dropped off at a vote center. We had a huge number of vote by mail ballots coming back on election day or after. As long as they're postmarked by election day, the post office has 7 days to get them to us. Because I was kind of seeing that trend that people are going back to, and whatever efforts we made to try to encourage people to vote early was kind of going back to people wanting to wait till election day. I asked the county leadership, can I get some more equipment? Because, if you think about having those 500 or so thousand ballots that came in the 4 weeks, we were able to stay on top of those. And, by election night, we had got about 85% of those into the results that came out on election at that first results. Actually, and then but that 311 that came in on election day or after, that's a huge slug of ballots that we have to try to get into the process. So it actually took us till probably, I want to say Saturday or Monday after election to actually get every vote by mail ballot started into the process. So that wasn't acceptable to me, because that means if somebody signed up to the vote tracking, the ballot tracking service, if they dropped a ballot off in a drop box on election day and I didn't get it into the process until Saturday, they weren't getting a message that I received their ballot until Saturday. So I'm getting calls from voters going, I dropped my ballot off, I still haven't gotten my message. So I went to the county budget, to the board, and asked for some more equipment. They invested $4.1 million. I got 2 more ballot sorters. I went from 2 to 4 mail sorters to get more ballots into the process right away. And I increased the number of ballot extractors, the ones that slice the envelopes and blow them open so somebody can pull the ballot out one at a time. I added 50% more of those. So in this election, in March, rather than having about 85% of the early vote by mail ballots in that first night, election night results, I had 91%. And rather than it taking a day, during the first 4 weeks of early voting, rather than it taking a day to get them into the sorter to scan their voter ID and take a picture of their signature on the envelope, would be the next day typically in prior elections, because we only had 1 sorter for incoming and one sorter for ballots that were going through second. They had their first review and signatures, and they either were going to accept it or for more review. So we had 1 sorter getting intake and another sorter that was handling the ballots we were processing as we were going to sort them down further. Because I was able to add another sorter for intake, we then, if we picked up ballots at our 122 drop boxes before noon, they were through the sorter by the end of the shift that day. And we got more into the first night's count. On E+7, so 1 week after, we had 96% of all the ballots that we ended up counting in this election were in the results report by the following Tuesday. Whereas in November 22, 7 days after, it was only 89% of all the ballots. So we saw some improvement by the county making that investment and being able to have more capacity to process mail ballots. Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming out. Obviously, voter integrity is important to all of us. Our vote is a cherished privilege that we have in America. What is your take on the amount of time we have to vote in California, and how long is that time?
So it depends on the election. I'll start with the point that the reason California provides a period of time to finish processing ballots is that they want me and every county elections official to do everything I can to give a voter an opportunity to have their ballot counted. So for a regular statewide election, we have 30 days to certify. In Orange County, we don't take all 30 days, but we could have up to 30 days. In a presidential election, we only have 28 days. in the special recall election I'm doing next month in Anaheim for one of their city council members. That deadline is only 24 days because for municipal elections, the certification deadline is the fourth Friday after Election Day. And so it depends on the type of election. Typically, it's very frequently it's 30 days or 28 days, depending on whether it's presidential or not.
I think what I was going at, the same day voting, do we need more than 1 day to vote? And if we,
You were going on the front end.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
What do we have? We have 3 months to vote, 2 months, or how long do we have? I think that it would be for voter integrity to go back to 1 day voting and a mail-in process. I think that's ample time to vote. So what's your take?
Yeah.
What is the time?
So I don't see. I don't see the state legislature reducing the early voting period. So
How long is it?
I'm required to mail a ballot to all active registered voters, not counting military and overseas voters. I have to mail those earlier. But for all the voters that are local, I have to mail those 29 days before Election Day. And if somebody didn't want to wait for it to show up at their home, that Monday, 4 weeks ahead of Election Day, they could come into my office and be able to vote on the spot that day. They don't have to wait. And so that's the early voting period is basically, if you go back, backwards in the calendar, you've got an election on Tuesday, you go 4 weeks and then 1 day to that Monday. That's when I have to mail the ballots. My ballot drop boxes are required by law to be open 28 days before Election Day, but we unlock them the same day we mail ballots. And then in-person voting under the Voters' Choice Act starts 10 days before Election Day, so actually those vote centers are open for 11 days. I can tell you that right now, when you look at the number of check-ins per day for those 11 days, and we've got only a small number, we've got 1/5 of the vote centers are open for the first week, and then all of them are open the last 4 days. So when we had 183 in the last election, 37 were open 10 days before, and then the remainder of the 183 opened on the Saturday before Election Day. So you look at the check-ins for in-person voting, and you add up all the voters who check in the first 7 days, and then compare it to the number of people who vote on Election Day, it's like anywhere from 3 to 10 to 1. So people are still their voter behavior is still to wait till Election Day. We do start to see pickup in check-ins on that Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So if you add those in, then you're getting closer to like a 3 to 1 ratio of number of voters on Election Day versus the first 10 days. So voters aren't necessarily taking advantage of that early in-person voting. We're doing what we can to let people know that they can if they want. They're going to probably not have a line if they come in the week before. But people still may want to wait. So to that issue, the original author in the state that's currently in the state Senate of the Voters' Choice Act that established that time period of voting for 11 days, he is open to amendments, but my gut is that 11 days is probably not going to change in his amendment because you've got the county saying, hey, we want some flexibility because we don't have a lot of people showing up the first 7 days, and then you've got voter advocates who want us to do more. So I don't know where that's going to shake out, but that will potentially be a debate. It's in suspense right now, so I don't know if it's going to go forward. But
well, thanks for coming out. But my last question is, if we wanted to get our favorite city council candidate or my supervisor, if we wanted to go out and harvest ballots, what are the rules on harvesting ballots? And can a church do that, or can neighbors do that in their neighborhood?
So state law says that every voter has the right to give their vote by mail ballot to anyone they want to return it. So under state law, the voter is authorized to have anybody return their ballot. That's been a while. I've been in elections since 2018. It's always been in effect. Correct. So it changed. I want to say it changed around 2018 because
The state legislature did that.
Yes. Yeah.
Not the voters. The voters did not vote that into.
Correct. That was a bill. So any person any voter can authorize any person they want to return their ballot. The law says the person who's authorized is supposed to sign the envelope as well. and they're supposed to return it within 3 days or by 8 p.m. on election day, depending on. No, they can't get. You could if you. You could turn them in. I mean, you're required under law to get them to me within 3 days or by 8 p.m. on election day. You could if you wanted. That's the way the state law is. What I tell people is that I suggest you only authorize somebody you trust to turn your ballot in, and then to verify that trust. I think that was something Reagan said. Yeah, trust and verify. So that's when the verify is signing up for the ballot tracking system to get notified to know that person has actually turned your ballot in to me. So it's allowable under state law. A voter can authorize any person to turn it in, and that person has certain responsibilities to get it to me.
Now, in the past, if someone wanted to do that at their church, they'd have to be a signed, authorized receiver of ballots at like a drop box. But you're saying that if we come in the church and sign it off to somebody at the church, they can bring it in for us.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
And the last little thing I'll add to that is that while I said there are certain responsibilities for the person who's authorized to return it, if that person doesn't sign it like they're required to, the law says I still have to process the ballot without that signature. Yeah. So we will, if somebody walks into a vote center and has a stack of ballots, we've trained our staff to see whether or not that authorized signature is there and to encourage them to sign it. But if that person just went to a drop box and put it in, I'd have no way of knowing whether the voter put it in or if the authorized person put it in. Yes, sir.
So on Assembly Bill 37, that gives everybody a ballot in the state now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's mandated by the state, do they have to reimburse our county for some of those costs?
In theory.
Okay.
Do they know?
So what are your concerns about, it's in a budget shortfall right now.
Yeah.
And come July this year when the fiscal year starts, what's the county been talking about as far as, is it practical that we're going to be reimbursed for the cost of the election in November?
For the elections, the only elections that the state reimburses me for are like the governor's recall election. The regular elections that have state offices, state assembly, state senate, governor, just for a regular election, the state gives counties no money for those elections.
But when they mandate it through AB 37, when they mandate something, isn't it required by law that they're supposed to reimburse us as a county?
Yeah, but I think the list of bills that have unfunded mandates that have never been
right. Understood. Yeah,
I think is pretty big.
The inefficiencies of Sacramento. Now, on following the law and stuff, California Code of Regulations talks about the requirements for video surveillance on drop boxes.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing there? Because the language, as far as surveil, right, is to monitor. But there's a lot of drop boxes, by talking to your staff down in Santa Ana there, that don't have, say, video surveillance. What has been looked at, and is there any idea on cost to have video surveillance that's actually being monitored for our drop boxes?
No. Okay. So the boxes that we have that have video monitoring of are ones where we've installed it someplace where there was an existing, say it's at a city hall or something, and they've got something already. But what I'll tell you is that the question I ask people when they ask me about this is what if I was sitting there at looking at a camera feed, what am I looking for? As I mentioned, with under state law, anybody can return anybody else's ballot if they're authorized. So if somebody walked up to a drop box and had 100 ballots, it's not illegal. So what would I be looking for if I had stationed somebody to look at 122 cameras?
We'd be looking for them going from drop box to drop box to drop box to drop box, right? Which would not be a natural pattern or a habit with $5.30 a gallon gas right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were to take all 100 to one box, that certainly would be a natural habit of someone that's legally harvesting and collecting those. But if someone goes around to 10 or 15 or 20 different boxes in a nighttime period, that doesn't seem like a natural habit. That would be something that we'd want to look into. There's a movie called 2,000 Mules that obviously showed a lot of those things in other states.
Right.
So
but
that's,
what I
that's,
would, but what
if
I
we're
would-
not even,
yeah.
if we don't even have video on certain boxes, there's really no opportunity. And it seems like the law, at least the language, says it's a requirement, for that surveillance. It does say if feasible, but I don't know.
It encourages it. It doesn't say surveillance. It just says it's encouraged to have a security camera. It doesn't say that we're supposed to surveil.
Okay.
The other thing I would say, because you brought up 2,000 Mules, is that True the Vote was given a chance multiple times to provide their evidence of what you're saying as part of a court case. They eventually admitted they had no evidence. So, bottom line, am I concerned if somebody's manipulating the system? Yes. But I haven't
Right
looked
now, there's just no really means to do that.
The way I'm looking at it in terms of being a good steward of the taxpayer money is that if I don't have a very specific benefit of having somebody sitting at, a bank of monitors watching everybody using a Dropbox, it's going to be a hard sell that there's a benefit to the taxpayer to make that expense.
So ultimately, when someone can pick up 100, 200 ballots, right, and drop them in the ballot box,
Mhm.
ultimately, when you get them, those people have signed it.
Right, we're doing signature.
Legitimate voters, right?
Yeah, we're doing the signature comparison still.
So then, in a way, we are protected, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's.
So-
I think the concern is that somebody is like sort of, getting these people to do this.
Right.
And sign their name.
Maybe
And then they're
manipulating that, yeah.
manipulating them, like, you say, like at a church or some other place where they have control of these people.
Right.
And they're just gathering these things and just dropping in places.
And that's the concern people have. Last question, and then I'll move on to, I know Bruce has a question here. As far as Huntington Beach, or if Irvine, say, because they're a charter city as well, was to pass similar ballot measure that the people actually pass, right? That say they want to have ID in their local elections. You've been around elections and things. What does running our own election in Irvine look like? What is that process? What is?
Well,
Are they going to use machines still? Are they going to hand count? Like, what does that process look like as far as a city running its own elections?
so I'll start with the last part about hand counting. So last year, the legislature passed a law that banned counties from hand counting for any election where a jurisdiction had more than a certain number, like
Senate Bill 969.
yeah. And so, given the number of voters in the city under state law, whether or not the city can make an argument that under their charter they have the authority to change the rules would be something that they could try to argue. I'm not a legal expert on charters as to whether that would be successful or not.
I'm not
But
asking you to comment
yeah.
on that, but
But-
it's more, what does that process look? I mean, you've been around
It's-
long
it-
enough
it would be-
before we had all the
yeah.
machines and things. What does that process look like for a city?
To me, it's doing everything except maintaining the voter rolls. They would, basically, I'd still maintain the voter rolls for them, and then they would request a list to be able to mail the ballots out, or however they wanted to get create the rosters. But they'd have to have their own locations. They'd have to have their own equipment. There's a number of things they would have to do to ensure there was proper access for people to exercise their right to vote.
Yeah, to your credit, I have filed numerous public information acts on your office.
Okay.
And every one of them responded beyond what I ever dreamed of. That part was fantastic. But your oath of office includes, you give an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California.
Yep.
I think everybody would feel a whole lot better if you looked at the Constitution's demand of free and fair and proper elections and fought like hell when stupid things come out of the legislature. Like, if somebody can put 100 ballots in a drop box, you've lost chain of custody. And chain of custody is a requirement for a free and fair election.
Wouldn't you say the same thing if somebody handed it to a postal worker?
Well, handing anything to the postal worker breaks chain of custody, so yes, I would. But chain of custody is critical. I don't understand the state database because federal law is coming to California,
Mhm.
and it's not going to be good. So the Attorney General, one of those people, certify the federal part of the election.
The Secretary of State does.
The Secretary of State does.
So as the elections official for Orange County, I certify the results. It's kind of a play on words, but basically I'm required to issue a statement of votes that I'm certifying this is an accurate reflection of who voted. But like when there's city contests on it, I have to forward that to the city clerk, who officially certifies it and presents it to our city council to declare the results. I certified that the results are accurate, and then if there's any contest that the Board of Supervisors has jurisdiction over, then I present those to the Board of Supervisors. So for this March election, in one of the supervisory races, nobody got more than a majority of the votes, so the top two are going to run off. So the board essentially declared the top two were nominated to be on the ballot in November. In the other contest, for Supervisor Wagner, he got more than a majority, so the Board of Supervisors declared him the winner.
Yeah.
And so, and similarly, I'm sending the state offices, I'm sending up to the Secretary of State, and they're actually certifying those contests.
But in the contest of the voter roll, is the state voter roll that the Attorney General relies on, do you add up the county rolls, or do the counties take a piece of the state roll? How does
There's communication back and forth in real time. If they make a change, it's getting pushed down to me.
All right, so essentially it's one set of data.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just potentially, if somebody mails me a paper affidavit they've signed out, I'm inputting it, and then it's getting pushed up to the state.
Are you aware that federal law requires a level of accuracy that is minuscule for the voter roll?
What?
It's like less than one. I mean, it's like 0.00125%.
I've heard that kind of a number for the accuracy of the voting equipment, but I'd not heard it for the
voter roll. Okay, it's coming. Does the machine there isn't much in the public domain about the machines Orange County's using in terms of where all the fraud's taking place. Does that machine have proprietary software? In other words, if somebody came in and said, we want to go down the software of that machine.
I would say, no, you can't.
Okay, and that violates federal law. You said the machines are not connected to the internet.
The voting system, so the equipment that prints a ballot, that scans a ballot, or helps a voter mark a ballot, none of that equipment's connected to the internet, as well as back in my office, I've got a room with windows all around it that is where the thumb drives are brought in.
Okay, I get all of that.
Yeah.
But is the internet, you said your machines are not connected to the internet, but how do you know the internet is not connected to your machines? Have you ever dissected a machine to see if there's anything inside? Because across the country, they're opening up machines. The manufacturer swears they cannot be connected to the internet. You open it up and there's a modem in there. You open it up, there's Microsoft software to get into it.
If I was to open up one of my pieces of equipment, I could no longer use that piece of equipment.
The certification, all right, I don't want to debate you.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in a heart for a free and fair election.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Our people, and all of these things are why people are upset, is because every time you turn around, you go, does it have proprietary software? Yes. Well, you can't certify a machine with proprietary software because part of the certification in federal law is the software.
Well, I would say that I think you may be reading federal law wrong, because otherwise, how is the Secretary of State certifying the equipment?
No, it's not. No, you just sign your signature to certify. That's easy.
I don't. No, they do testing. Secretary of State does testing.
There's no point in you and I arguing. I'm just trying to get the answer to the question.
No.
Because nationwide, like there's a cease and desist order coming to California because the database and the whole process violates federal law. There was one filed in Maryland a month ago with a cease and desist order, and their elections have been stopped. So it's coming.
Okay. And what I would share with you is that I have been served litigation that tries to make that same point, that there's a provision in the law that says that you can't have proprietary software. Those have not been successful because what the law says
Let's
is
not do this, really. Let's not do this because
That's good.
More questions?
I don't want to argue with you.
Okay.
That wasn't the point.
Yes, sir.
I'm surprised no one's asked this question yet. What protections are in place for me going into the voting booth and claiming I'm somebody else?
So the voter under state law is required to provide their name and their address. We look them up on the roster, and that's the extent of the authority that I have. Is to, if based on the name and the address you've given me, the extent of my authority is to look you up, see if that information matches with a voter on the roster. If it does, then it allows you to check in.
So I can go say my neighbor's name, my neighbor's address, vote for him, go down to another location, give a woman's name, because you can't even question my gender, and say my name is Jane, and that's me right there in the list. Here's my address. I go vote again. I do that 10 times. You have no protections in place, correct?
I'm saying I don't have the authority to do anything other than to look, based on the name and the address you're giving me, to look you up on the roster, and if you're there, allow you to check in. You're then signing a statement that under penalty of perjury, you are that person, so that if we find out later that what the hypothesis you're saying has actually happened, that person's going to be referred to the district attorney for investigation.
Quick question. How many people did you refer to the district attorney after the March ballot?
We primarily, what we refer is when somebody returns 2 ballots, and we will refer them to the district attorney. That ranges from anywhere from less than 50 to up to 200 per election. What I can say is that the district attorney at a press conference ahead of this March election told the media that Orange County has never, in looking into those things, has never found intent for violation of the law and has never prosecuted somebody. So there's been no prosecutions in Orange County for voter fraud. So I will refer those things. They will then investigate. They'll talk to the voter. They'll try to figure out whether the voter intended to try to vote twice or not, and then they'll make a determination about whether to prosecute. And they haven't since I've been the registrar.
Well, follow-up question. Is there anything in place should a voter worker suspect the person is not who they say they are?
Yeah, so the law does allow the actual poll worker, the precinct board member, in state laws is what it's referred to. We call them customer service reps in our vote centers. They do have, if they suspect that if they have reason to believe that the person is not the voter, they can require that the voter verbally provide an oath whether they are the voter or not. If the voter provides that oath and says they're this person, then that's sufficient evidence for us to move forward. Otherwise, it would require a substantial amount of probable cause evidence to be able to overrule that, which I would think my customer service reps wouldn't have at their hand while they're working at my vote center.
Okay, so I'm a health insurance broker, okay? And we are going to have open enrollment for everybody in the state, regardless of their immigration status. And so I am assuming I am going to get inundated starting October 15th with all kinds of folks who are going to want to buy health insurance because they're newly eligible to do so, whether they are permanent residents of the state or not. My big complaint, of course, I can't ask, and as a broker, I am obligated by the state to help that person register.
Right.
And it's really uncomfortable to help that person register when I know that they haven't been able to provide any of the documentation that shows that they are here appropriately in the country.
Thank you.
One, and two, on that form that you have to fill out, and if you could ever do anything about this, it would be delightful. The form assumes that you're not registered, instead of allowing somebody who's applying for coverage through Covered California to check the box that I'm already registered. And the biggest complaint I get from folks who are already registered is they get a registration request notification. So if there's any influence that you have, Bob, in any way to get that stupid already registered, but I do anticipate that I'm going to see other kinds of issues, and it puts real estate brokers, it puts insurance brokers in a very uncomfortable position in that I know somebody is claiming to be A when they are B, and yet they're going to get a voter registration form and be registered. And I don't know what we're going to do about that, but again, the kinds of conflicts that we've talked about here.
So as a National Voter Registration Act agency, which what sounds like you're describing, you are required to inform your customer about the opportunity to register to vote. But if they say no, you leave it at that, right? Yeah. Okay.
But when you're doing this online these days, there are 3 places that you have to say no.
Okay.
And does not give you the opportunity to say, in California, this isn't the California system.
Yeah.
That I'm already registered, thank you very much.
Yeah, and similarly under the Motor Voter Act in California, when you do something at the DMV, you have to proactively opt out of re-registering or registering. It starts you down the process. It'll ask you, if you don't say no, you don't want to register or re-register. It will take you to the next. It'll take you to the next screen. So.
And again, just welcome the opportunity to say that clearly.
Although I do have a question, at the DMV, you're signing in that little electronic pad.
Yeah.
Which is almost illegible.
Correct.
So
I would agree with that.
How do you compare signatures when their original signature on the registration is illegible?
I would say in those situations, it's not going to compare. And so, yeah, and the resolution of the images we get from the DMV are very low. So that's kind of for me right now, that's the number one factor is why I wouldn't want to incorporate any kind of automatic signature verification software like the banks use into the process, because my signature images are so low resolution, it's not going to really be effective. But we did.
The DMV's not upgrading?
I would love for the DMV to upgrade a lot of things. What I can share regarding that issue is that we did the law change going into this January 1 this year that allows us to offer somebody whose signature doesn't compare an opportunity to cure that signature electronically rather than only by paper. And so we had on our website a link to one of our vendors who had a process for you to use your phone to actually finger sign again.
Like a DocuSign type of a process.
Yeah, and so that was added for this last election. The other reason I mentioned before that if we find that signatures don't compare, we're sending a paper affidavit to that person after the election and encouraging them to give us a written signature.
How long do they have to cure their signatures after the election?
So the law does not have a specific day. So what the law says is that I have to make sure that I mail that notification at least 8 days before I certify, before I complete the canvass. And then the voter has until 5 p.m. 2 days before I certify. So.
And you don't know when you're going to certify necessarily either.
No. So what I do to start when we first draft the letters is that we recite that law that the statute says 2 days before, and then I add a sentence that says we encourage you to ensure that you can meet that deadline to get it back to us by this date. And so the date that I start with on the letters is I look at, okay, the post office can deliver ballots to me until 7 days after. It's possible we'll find that the signatures don't compare on some of those. The county, if say an Orange County ballot went to LA County on election day, LA County has 8 days to get it to me. So when I'm setting that first date, I'm basically sending it 8 days after, so basically 16 days after election day, because I'm accounting for the possibility that another county is going to send me a ballot on the 8th day that might not have a signature that doesn't compare, or the signature is missing, because I have to send a notification that the signature is missing. And then I've got to give the voter 8 days from that day. So my first recommended date is usually about 16 days after the election. And then as we're getting closer, I may have to extend it. So for this primary election, I didn't. We were able to stick to the original recommended date and certify 2 days later. In, I think, the first primary in 22, it was either primary or the general in 22, LA waited to the last possible second to send us a ballot that had to be cured. And so I had kind of a day in mind when I thought we might be able to certify, and I had to add a day because LA County got us to us on the last possible day. The other thing that impacts when I certify is completion of the audits. So, depending on how many contests are on the ballot, how many precincts we have to hand count, it could take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to complete that audit. And we typically don't start that audit until our practice is that we don't start that audit until we've counted all of the mail ballots except the ones that are out for cure or provisionals or those, if those are the only ballots that are left to go potentially into the count are the ones that have a cure notice out or that are provisional, then at that point we'll start the audit. And so, depending on how many, it's very possible that I won't be able to certify on E+18 for the presidential because of the length of the audit, all those things.
Okay, I'm changing the subject a little bit, but so the rule is that if a ballot is undeliverable, it's supposed to be returned to you.
Correct. Ballots are not forwardable.
So what happens I'll use UCI as an example because it's in Irvine. Students rarely stay at the same address 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. So do you get a lot of ballots returned from UCI?
I don't know. I would think it would make sense that we probably would because of just what you mentioned, that their address changes during their time there. Because really it's,
Do you track those return ballots? So if I were to want to do a little data research, I could go down to the registrar and pick out, let's say, the UCI precincts.
Yes.
And find out how many ballots were returned.
Yes. And if you wanted to actually know the voters, you'd have to fill out an application for voter registration information because voter registration information, including whether somebody voted, what their political party is, that's confidential as a starting point. But there are specific uses. As he mentioned, you can do a request for information. But so, if you're a journalist, if you're doing an audit, doing some sort of audit, or there's certain purposes. Another government agency say they want to mail stuff to voters in their jurisdiction. Those are allowable uses under the state law for me to provide them a voter list. So depending on, you fill out that form. If you write down a use for that information that under state laws is permissible to then get it, then I could potentially give you an actual voter list of all the ballots that came back undeliverable.
So UCI kind of acts as their own post office. It's not legal for them to really just throw all of those ballots away if they, are undeliverable. They're supposed to return them to you.
They're supposed to return it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one more question. I had two complainants to me, two voters told me they registered as Republican and voted as such for a long time. But this year at the primary, they got the Democrat ballots, two of them. What happens?
So, I would need those voters. I need the voter information to research. And so as he said, very frequently what's happened is that a voter has done something at the DMV, has not been very attentive to the screens about re-registering to vote, and when they get to the screen...
They never changed.
Huh?
They said that they never re-registered or changed the party.
What I'm saying is if they went to the DMV, they may not have realized that they re-registered. They may not have realized that there was a page asking them what party they wanted to be. So if I had the voter's name, I could look at their voter registration record, look at the transaction history for the registration, and see where their party changed and why. What the method was. I can look that up for them. So I've not heard Republican to Democrat. Typically what I hear is a political party to no party preference, because if somebody's not paying attention at DMV and the page comes up to pick a party and they don't pick something, they get moved to no party preference. So that's typically the president, and this comes up in the last election we had because we have actual party ballots. And I'm required under law to send multiple educational materials to no party preference voters to tell them about their options, about either voting a crossover ballot for these three parties that allow you to vote in their election without re-registering, or you need to re-register if you want to vote a ballot for one of these three parties. And the Republican Party has always chosen to require voters to re-register to be able to vote their ballot. The Democratic Party has always let NPP voters vote one of their ballots without re-registering. So, but bottom line, if you sent those voters to me, we could do some research and see what happened on their transaction history, when they re-registered, what the method of re-registration was that caused their party preference to change. Okay, no problem.